Hello, welcome to another edition of the Pace Report. I'm Brian Pace, reporting live from Sub Rosa here in New York City. What better way to kick off my piano series here on the Pace Report is spotlight and interview a gentleman that has done some very important things to the world of jazz as well as Latin music. Eddie Palmieri is a 10-time Grammy Award winning pianist as well as band leader. Also, he's an NEA Jazz Master, and this gentleman has done some very important things, ranging from creating a band entitled La Perfecta in the late 1950s, in which he brought some very different musical styles to Latin jazz, as well as he's brought a very unique sound to his piano playing, which involves a percussive style in his technique. Tonight here at Sub Rosa, he is going to be kicking off his residency, which he's going to be having every week here at Sub Rosa, now until the end of August, in which he's going to profile and showcase not only many ensembles, but also feature some of his best friends in the industry. Tonight I had a chance to sit down and break bread to speak with Mr. Palmieri about his career, talk about his brand new record, Wisdom, which is on the Rope-A-Dope Records imprint, as well as sit down and reflect on some of his very important musical influences, as well as growing up here in New York City. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the sounds on the premiere of Eddie Palmieri and his weekly residency here at Sub Rosa, live here in New York City as part of the Pace Report. Eddie Palmieri, this is the beginning of your residency here at Sub Rosa. Tell everybody what you're planning to do as far as musically showcasing not only the legacy for 80 years of your music, but also to music fans how you're going to express yourself musically here.
Well, first of all, that 80 years is a misnomer. Chocolate Amenteros, the Cuban trumpet player that died at 93, passed away, told me that after 50 you start counting by one again. So I'm 30. I'll be 31 December 15th. Let's get that straight, okay? And it's a quaint, I had never been here, but it's a quaint setting. And if you notice, it's going to be, can't bring in the big band in here, you know. So it's going to be interesting. We're going to do like quartets. We're going to do quintets. We're going to do sextets. We'll do a septet, you know. I'll even do a duo, triple, you know, a trio with my bass player, Lucas Curtis. And it's going to be quite interesting. Plus, we have one night, it's going to be dedicated to the son and the son cubano from Cuba. And we're going to have Nelson Gonzalez on tres. The tres is the instrument that came in with the Moors called the laúd. And then when the Spaniard brings the African captive to Cuba, the instrument that comes out of there then is the tres. Okay. And he's, I would say he's maybe the best tres player now in the world now, because it's not utilized almost ever again in Cuba. Everything changed after the doctrine in 1960. So that's going to be another night of interesting playing, and these are great players. So I'm looking forward to having a wonderful musical night.
And you're playing, best of all, you're playing at home, New York City.
Oh, that's right. There we go. In New York. And I was born in Manhattan on 112th Street between Madison and Park.
Okay.
You know, and this still is Manhattan, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes.
So it's going to be wonderful. It's going to be wonderful, and it's going to be different. And I'm taking upon myself the challenge of playing more piano, more pianistically, and going into different kind of repertoires. So, excuse me. So, I'm quite excited about it.
And also, you have a lot to celebrate. You have a brand new record that's on the Rope Dope label. Tell everybody about this record.
Well, this is the greatest Latin jazz CD ever recorded, in my opinion. And I'll sit down and discuss that with anyone that would like to discuss it with me. Because at my age, at 30, going on 31, I can say anything I want. Okay, but it's the personnel. The personnel is the greatest personnel ever put together. My son, Eddie Palmieri II, produced it. We'll start with Mr. Ronnie Cuba on baritone. We'll go into Joe Locke on vibes. We'll go into Bernard Purdy on drums again after he recorded with me in 1971, Harlem River Drive. Marcus Miller on bass on one composition called Sabiduría, Wisdom. The Spinoza, Dave Spinoza, one of the greatest guitarists that plays all the galleys, unbelievable. He also recorded with Lennon and Paul McCartney, and then he was the leader of the Yoko Ono band. So he's on the CD. Then that rhythm section from Lucas Curtis on bass. We had Luisito Quintero from Venezuela playing the majority of the also Camilo Molina on my timbalero, little Johnny Rivero on conga. And then we had up to 46 years. We came back, you know, Mr. Nicky Marrero, that he started with me when he was 17 years old, and he changed the Perfecta band into, I used to call that rhythm section the Little Devils, Los Diablitos, okay? And that was him, Eladio Perez, and Chucky Lopez, the son of Tommy Lopez, that played with me in La Perfecta. So these are the personnel. It gives you the highest degree of quality, okay, which that's my life. And the variations of the compositions, and then Joe Locke on vibes, which we're going to open up with Mr. Joe Locke next Monday the 17th, I believe. And it's just, and we have the great Alfredo de la Fe. You know, he opens up with the violin, unreal. And I use the violin like utilizing 4 trumpets. When they come to the mambo, the full tuning, it's not trumpets, it's 4 violins coming at you. 3 violins and a viola. We overdubbed him. A very exciting composition called Cuerdas y Tumbao between him and Lucas Curtis on bass. But the whole, and then the great Mr. Donald Harrison from New Orleans. And he sings in a number called The Uprising. And he gives me some New Orleans, you know. Oh, ho, ho, your mama, oh, ho, your papa. You won't believe it. They're not going to play this. But it's amazing. And it's he sings everything. And what he's saying there is shallow waters but deep, you know. And then he raps on it. And unbelievable, you know. But that was my old number called La Libertad, Lógico. And I call it the uprising for this change, you know. So it's an exciting the best Latin jazz CD ever recorded, and the mixing and the recording because of Jay Messina, the engineer that also mixed with me Harlem River Drive, and with the production of my son Eddie, who's really taking care of business, you know, and I love him and Lena very much. So that's what you have. It's called, and we called it Wisdom. And then my wife and I just said, you know, why don't you also call it Sabiduría? That's the translation of wisdom. I said, okay, and that's it.
couple of very important things that is very, very, very important to you. One, playing in the band and being a band leader and a composer. And the art of composing has to be very, very intricate because you have to provide for horns, your rhythm section.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you look for, and how do you write around your musicians?
Well, that is, I'm an unorthodox arranger, you know. I don't have the preparation to write for big orchestra, big band, but I have the preparation to write for 5 horns, which I'm quite unique at that, okay? And those 5 horns, which could be 3 trumpets and 2 trombones, is the band that we use with the vocalist, the big band that we use. You got to make sure that the personnel also is the one that you want. That's one. The compositions, which are, let's say, Sabiduría, the only thing we don't have is the vocalist on there, but it's the same structure. The structure, there's the book called The Greek Philosophers that was given to me by a beautiful woman, friend, and it says, in matter and form, if the mode fits the structure, then it's the structure that we must analyze. And I learned that intuitively. Then I learned it from the Cuban orchestras in Cuba, from the 40s and the 50s, which was their height for the orchestras that influenced, the orchestras that were influenced by them here, like Tito Puente, Tito Rodriguez, because Machito was here already in 1939. Then I learned that scientifically when I studied Mr. Bob Bianco for 25 years. He also played at Harlem River Drive. He sang at Harlem River Drive, a composition called Somewhere. And he took me into the world of Joseph Schillinger. Joseph Schillinger was a mathematical genius that George Gershwin studied with him. And he wrote 12 books in 2 big volumes. And this masterpiece is the mathematical basis of the arts, all the arts. In there, I found out what I knew intuitively. It's called tension and resistance. And to have tension and resistance is what's going to give you the highest degree of a harmonic and a rhythmical musical climax. And that's what I have in every composition. So this has nothing to do with being, ego or vain. I don't guess I'm going to excite you with my band. I know it. And every time I play in whichever form, I'm going to get you. Because every composition has that tension and resistance. That tension and resistance comes from a piano solo going into a bongo solo or a conga solo. The rhythm section is the pulse of my life. That's going to make that go into that whole tension and resistance. Unfortunately, that doesn't. It's not recorded that way anymore. The Latin pop that we do, that they call Latin music, there's no piano solo, there's no conga solo, there's no bongo solo, there's no bass solo, no trumpet solo, there's nothing. Just a bland composition of a arranger and a young man singing, which is fine, whatever it is. But that's not it, that's not it. The only one that's playing what is, it's me. There's nobody else because the pioneers, the all have passed away.
You playing with Tito Rodriguez.
From 58 to 60.
You got your chops in carrying it over to La Perfecta. Did you go against the grain because you were younger and you wanted to bring your voice to Latin music? No,
it started when I started my big break was in 1956 when I went with Vicentico Valdez. Right. In that band was Manny Oquendo, and Manny Oquendo and Vicentico and my brother was with Tito Puente. Then Vicentico left in 1954. I had a great pianist called Ray Cohen. Then he moved to Puerto Rico, and my brother recommended me to join the band. I was 19, and I learned the Cuban structures through the Cuban recordings that were recommended to me by Mr. Manny Oquendo. So I could never thank him enough for that. Then eventually he plays with La Perfecta. So I do 2 years with Vicentico. I played the Palladium. Never recorded with him because he used to use Rene Hernandez, the great Rene Hernandez, the Machito Orchestra, a pianist for the Machito band. And then I go with Tito Rodriguez from 58 to 60. When I leave Tito Rodriguez, I start an orchestra, and I'm always thinking the conjunto with 4 trumpets. But on a Tuesday night in a place called the Tritons in the Bronx, I knew the owner with a friend of mine. And on that Tuesday night, Johnny Pacheco was doing a jam session, and who's playing with him that day? The great Mr. Barry Rogers. And that's how it started. I told Barry, I play here. The next thing I know is we're playing with my rhythm section, just trombone, 1 trombone, and Ismael Quintana singing. And then the next time we have the wooden flute of George Castro, no trombone. And one night I had enough money for the both. And when I heard that, then I knew that was going to be the sound that I was after. We needed another trombone eventually to give us more power. And La Perfecta was the New York, the orchestra that was built out of New York City. And we changed the whole president of orchestras because everybody had trumpets and saxophones, mostly trumpets. And we changed it. I mean, after La Perfecta came in, I think all the trombones that were in the pawn shops were taken out,
Mm-hmm. What's easier for you, composing or arranging?
Oh, composing and arranging. Because I do sabiduría, they're all my compositions and all my arrangements. So it's like melody and harmony, which are the names of my two parakeets. They're complementary to each other. That's what I mean, naturally.
1, 2, 3, 4.
let's talk about piano. And I read some very interesting things about how you had three very important teachers that taught you different analytical as well as percussive parts of how to play and finger the piano.
Well, I started with my brother. Charlie Palmieri was the greatest pianist of his time. He was the genre that we play in. And then he also was one of the greatest society players, knew all the standards. He had an album called Easy Does It, which is an amazing album that was recorded in 1958. Then his form of attack was what I learned, to imitate my brother. And then I started to listen, when I was listening to the Cuban, then all the Cuban pianists became my favorite. Starting with the main one, there's two of them, Israel Lopez, that was with Arcaño and Cachao in Cuba, piano, and then Lili Martinez with Arsenio Rodriguez. And those are my two mentors, okay? Plus, later on is when I started to listen to jazz, that's something else. But I'm talking about the Latin music. Those were the guys, those were the gentlemen, those were the great pianists,
How did you incorporate the percussive nature of how you play into your music?
Donald Harrison, the great Donald Harrison from the he said, Eddie, you solo like a drummer.
Right.
But I started playing timbales with my uncle at 13, El Chino y su alma tropical. But my mother didn't go for that deal. That was not okie dokie, because she wanted me to on the piano. So she bought me the timbales and chipped it with my grandfather, because he said I was banging with 2 sticks and ruining all the furniture in the Bronx, because I was raised in the Bronx. Then she buys me this metal box that weighed more than 2 pairs of timbales, and now she would wait for my uncle, Chino. That was the name of the band, Chino y su alma tropical. I had another uncle there playing conga. And he, come on, Eddie, let's go, going to the gig, and now I'm going to pick up that box. And my mother would wait for me to go to pick it up. She said, there's one. Don't you see how beautiful your brother looks when he goes to perform and he doesn't have to carry an instrument? When will you learn? And I'm going, I'm learning more. That's called superiority of women. She won, and in 2 years I made a deal with my uncle that he couldn't refuse. I gave him the timbales. I went back on the piano. Plus, then on my piano teachers, I had the greatest pianist at 11 years old, which my brother was a student also, Miss Margaret Barnes, who's in the Negro history books, and she got me started. Then another great pianist called Claudio Savada from Spain, that he was Spaniard, and he taught me the independence of fingering, which no one really comprehends, in my opinion, because I'm teaching at Rutgers University. Austin, the students they can't believe how difficult it is to do. And then I got to work with them because their hands are already fixed at a certain age. You got to get that young. I was very fortunate. I met him when I was 15, and that was all, So then after that, Mr. Bob Bianco, the one I mentioned to you, that also took me into political science of Henry George, the Henry George School, and that's where compositions like Justicia came out, La Libertad, Vámonos pa'l Monte. They all had a political, message at the time, because there was so much turmoil in New York at that time. If you had the Black Panthers, then you had the Young Lords, right. And I knew the Young Lords, and I did a concert to bail them out of jail.
I remember that, yeah.
When they put the flag around the Statue of Liberty. Because of my dear friend Mickey Melendez and Felipe Luciano and Pablo Guzman, And Geraldo Rivera was their attorney.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, at that time. So, but those are incredible memories, that you carry and you treasure. They're there forever.
Eddie, one of the things that I've been trying to do here on the Pace Report, and as a person of color covering our music, one of the things that I think you have definitely been on the front lines trying to correct the stigma of the term salsa. And Tito Puente and Celia Cruz, they detested that term. And the thing that I like about this residency, it's called Afro-Caribbean nights.
Right.
And it's the proper term. And I want you to explain your take on why we have to get out of the word salsa and go back to Afro-Cuban.
Well, the best one who said it was Tito Puente. He said, I put salsa in my spaghetti, baby. It's true. But salsa is a misnomer. These are all these rhythmical patterns have the proper name. It comes from the madre rumba, the mulatto that comes out of the African and Spaniard cultural exchange comes the mulatto, and the mulatto puts the world to dance with his drum. They were herbalists and knew all the secrets of the medicinal properties of the plants, flowers, everything, and engineers. And from Madre Rumba, you have 3 derivatives. You have Guaguancó, Yambu, and Colombia. But when you're talking about the other rhythms, you have La Guaracha, you have a danzón, you have a changui that started even before all of that, the mambo, the cha-cha-cha. They all have their name. To lump them into just one word, salsa, with a business situation that Fania came up with, and they used, and they put salsa all over the world. So it just stood, it stood salsa. there's nothing wrong in saying something, but it's incorrect. It's not, has nothing to do with our music, because it has nothing to do with music. It has to do with, like Tito said, spaghetti sauce. So it started Afro-Cuban, then it becomes Afro-Caribbean when Cuba influences the Tito Puente in 1949, in the 40s and 50s, and that Tito Rodriguez. And then now it's Afro world. There's not a country in the world that I have been to that is not interested in how to play the bongo, timbales, and conga, and loves the difficulty of comprehending the most difficult rhythmical patterns to comprehend, which are the most exciting in the world.
Because you have to figure that the rhythm of the drums is a very, very important part of Afro-Cuban music.
Sure. When the Moors came in 711 into Spain, the drums drove them up the wall. Everybody fled. And then the Moors came in, they brought no women, and they stood there about 700 years, And that influence happened that when the Spaniard goes to the slave trade, they bring the African, then they bring them to Cuba, in particular that island, and out of there comes a mulatto, which I mentioned before, which put the world to dance. Throughout the inhumane treatment that they went through, they still brought that happiness for us that we call dancing and the drums, unbelievable.
I mean, you're traveling all over the world. Do you find that it's that Latin music or musicians like yourself are being booked, or do you think it's harder for playing in countries like Colombia or parts of South America? Are they booking more musicians like yourself?
The problem is that the planet is in upheaval politically. When I started going out to Europe, it was like 1984. I started in Algiers. It was probably about 10, 15 years. I should have been going to Europe before that. But I started in 84. I saw and had to go to Checkpoint Charlie when you had East Germany, you had the wall. We went through all of that. At 3 in the morning, we had German police dogs coming up in the German language. At 3 in the morning, with Puerto Ricans coming out of Puerto Rico, was scared. We all looked like Casper the Friendly Ghost, okay? So what I mean by that is then I also saw the borders open, throughout the years that I was going. And now the borders not only are closed again, but now with barbed wire and that, and it's a terrible situation what's happening in Europe. It's all over. Venezuela is in riot right now because lack of medicine and food, which is a country that has oil. The degree of corruption is beyond anybody's comprehension. Colombia just made a deal with the FARC, so they're not in war, but the conditions are all over the world. The condition is called poverty, and poverty is the parent of wars and crime. And it's all in Harlem River Drive in 1971.
That's right. That record, and you hit upon that. That is a very important recording. In fact, if memory serves me correct, Mr. Morris Levy had some very, very important FBI agents wondering what was going on.
In the CIA, twice they came to him. The first ones were the ones from Cuba when I did Mambo con Congas Mozambique. The Cubans were fighting in Angola, and now the first Cubans that came over accused me of being, Alpha 66, accused me of being a communist, and they threatened all the radio stations that they'll blow their station if they play my music. Then the FBI, CIA came. Then I did Harlem River Drive for a crossover, on roulette, not Tico, on roulette. That's when Morris Levy said, okay, let's do it on roulette. I said, oh, great. Tommy James, and they were on there? Okay. And now, my biggest fans were the Weathermen, the anti-government movement. Right. And here comes the CIA and the FBI again to Morris Levy, who was backed up by the Genovese family and the Colombo family. And he asked me, Mr. Palmieri, what did you record for me this time? And I said, well, okay, let me put it this way to you. I don't need the CIA and the FBI to come to see me for something that I didn't do. Is that clear, Mr. Palmieri? Clears the bell, boys.
This is the part of the interview where I ask you, the Jazz Master, the NEA Jazz Master,
Yes, sir.
to reflect on some of your influences and musicians that made the piano great. And the first one is a very important icon to not just composing, but the piano, Thelonious Sphere Monk.
Well, we got to go before that, Art Tatum.
I was going to hit that one. Well, let's hit Tatum first.
Art Tatum's daddy, you know. And then after that, you have Art Tatum, you have Bud Powell, you have the great Thelonious Monk, which I met. You have Bill Evans, my favorite, in the different form that you one that recorded with Miles, the classic. What was that? What is that? The name of the Kind of Blue? Kind of Blue. And they all, every single jazz player, you know, a singer, I mean, a pianist, is a favorite of mine. They're all Earl Gardner. You just keep, you know, they're just one after the other. Can't remember all, but you know, you get the thing. And the reason that I went into jazz, because I didn't understand it or like it, was Barry Rogers told me, Eddie, on a Sunday, come with me, I want you to hear something. You know, I said, oh, come, we're going to Birdland. Oh. And when I went in, it was the original John Coltrane quartet.
Coy Tyner, Garrison,
And,
Elvin Jones.
and now it's empty, the place, little, you know, Sunday night. And he's taking this incredible solo, John Coltrane. Then he stops and he sits down and he starts either figuring out the payroll or writing the lyrics to A Love Supreme, which he died shortly after, which meant that now McCoy Tyner is soloing 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes maybe or more. He's soloing, and the solo is getting more intense. His left hand, I can't even see it anymore. And at that moment, he became my mentor in jazz.
Because, that's funny because the night that you were inducted, he was the one that gave your speech for your induction speech. And McCoy, there's a spiritual connect to what he's doing. He and Randy Weston, and I think Cecil Taylor.
Weston's my boy. I just called him for his birthday.
Okay.
So I told him, listen, you don't forget, with Chocolate's, situation, you're 40, 90, right? You're 40. I'm 31, you 40. So he said, well, listen, Eddie, I'm going to tell you something. Because I told him, this is what I told Randy Weston and Chucho Valdez, another favorite, and Cubacaba. These are great pianists. And I tell him, listen, when Randy Weston or Chucho Valdez comes on the bandstand to play, the piano starts to shake. The piano starts to shake. No, let him touch me. Don't let him touch me. And I love him very much. So I called him, and my son called me, even the dentist. I called Randy Weston, and he said, well, okay, Eddie, thanks, about 90, but I'm going to go and hang out with Candido because he's 93. I said, oh, he's older than me.
I wanted to ask you about Art Tatum and Monk's style. What was it about their technique that you saw that you had to bring your own game to jazz?
Well, the technique that Art Tatum used, you had classical pianists coming to hear him play. That's how incredible he was. I mean, the two hands, his style of playing and his fingering was just immaculate. Plus, that he was legally blind. He could see just a little bit enough to play some cards or something like that. So he's got to be. He's like daddy. He's like Louis Armstrong on the trumpet. So then Monk. I have a great story of Monk because Barry Rogers gave me an album that he plays T for two. And the gentleman who wrote the composition, the T for two, when he heard the version that Monk did of his composition, he became a coffee addict. What the hell was that? Monk was amazing, and his chordal structures, his form of playing, everything about him was just unique. Unfortunately, that all those pioneers went through real hardships because of the racism in New York and all over in New York, the United States, but in New York in particular and they showed that racism when they came up with the cabaret card. And when they came up with that cabaret card, I had to get it. You have to go to get fingerprinted in the whole thing. And you could play without the cabaret card, but you can't play without the cabaret card in a place they sell liquor. You're out of business. So that's how they had to take over for Europe. And Paris was the first country that opened up her arms to Dexter Gordon, Thelonious Monk, but Powell, Horace Parlance, who just passed away. He couldn't take it, what was going on, and that's why he moved to Europe. And I saw him play with Chet Baker, Horace Parlance, and he has problems with because of polio. And I said, help me. I thought he had about 15 fingers when he was playing. That's how bad he was, And then I went in the back and I said hello to him. I said, oh, Mr. Parlance, that was absolutely, just trying to keep up with the cats, Eddie. That's all, trying to keep up with the cats.
you're gonna trip when I read this, and I want to see how accurate this is, because we're on piano players. You said that you was warned not to listen to Cecil Taylor by Barry Rogers.
Yeah.
Now Cecil Taylor, he's another guy.
Yeah, no, Barry said, the only thing I want you to do, Eddie, you'll never listen to Cecil Taylor. And I wish I would have to meet Cecil Taylor, but what he did was also unique, and he's another one of my favorite pianists, you know. Right. And then we can't forget
how about
Keith Jarrett?
Keith Jarrett,
Herbie Hancock.
How about Oscar Peterson? What did you think?
Peterson, coming from Canada, born there with the most incredible technique. How he died and his amputations and all that was so sad. Yeah. And then you have oh my goodness, Chick Corea, which I know Chick, you know, and I know every time I see Mr. Hancock, I tell him, there's the man, and he goes, no, you're the man. But these are great musicians, you know, great pianists, you know, and I get to a point that I tell everybody, you know, I hate them all. I hate all the great pianists. They're just so incredible. And Bill Evans is one of my favorites. I just got a CD as a gift from Lucas Curtis, my bass player, in 1958 with Scott LaFaro, you know, and Bernard. Let me see who the drummer came. Yeah, I get the drummer. The thing is, what I'm leading to is then they
was it Paul Motion?
Thank you, Paul Motion. When 2 years later, 4 years later, they play in 1961 or 62. They played the Village Vanguard, and 2 weeks later, he dies in a car crash. Just like Richie Powell with the great trumpet player. He died so young. You call him Brownie. What was
Clifford Brown?
Clifford Brown, yeah.
You know, there's a very important story about Eddie Palmieri and the Apollo Theater. 1964. Yeah. Esther Phillips, Arthur Prysock, Flip. Now, I got to ask you this now because...
I tell you about Flip. After Flip Wilson is starting.
Yeah.
And he used to come and watch it. We'd be playing on the side entrance. We'd be playing stickball in between shows, you know. So now he comes on stage, and my wife used to love him. Man, we come up to watch him, and he told the story about Christopher Columbus, you know. And he said, well, you know, Chris was black, you know. So now the Queen is now Isabel Johnson. So he says that he went begging for, you know, got on his knees begging Isabel Johnson for the money, you know. Well, he looked like he was begging. I mean, he went into a thing, man. You're in a theater now, right? You know. And he said that when Chris was the kid, none of the kids, I remember, if I can remember, it's because I loved it so much, the older show, that none of the mothers would let their kids play with Chris because they said that Chris was crazy. But Chris didn't care. You know, he smoked his funny little cigarette, and then he'd go into his room and sing his favorite song, America, America. in tears, one after the other, man. And now finally, he gets into that at sea, and now that weeks and months ago, and here comes the first mate, and he comes over to Chris and says, hey, Chris, the men and I have been talking, and if you don't find land in 2 more days, we're going to kick your ass. Now they finally hit America, and they're coming down the thing, and all, you know, and now it's all the Indian, but they were black, they washing, you know, man. And she said, what you all doing here? And he said, come to discover y'all. You know, he said, but you're going to discover the rock side of your head. Every day. I was there every day, man. When he went out to do the show. Then we had Mongo, and then it was one of the most incredible, 1964, exactly, yeah.
You know, it's funny because I live in Harlem, and it seems like the Apollo, and you've always said that Harlem and the Apollo has
Sure.
It helped kickstart a lot of
I'll
people.
give you another a great one. My wife was born on the west side. She was born in Puerto Rico. She was raised on the west side, 136. She used to walk down to 125th with her girlfriend and go see the Apollo. She knew more about jazz when I was into the Latin. She had seen already Billy Eckstine with Sarah Vaughan. That was her favorite. Ellis Fitzgerald. You know, Dizzy Gillespie. She saw all the shows that she wanted to go see at the Apollo. You know, and I was like listening to doing Tito Puente and the Mambos, you know, because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be have an exciting band for the dancers, you know, and I was able to achieve that. And then especially when we did the Palladium Ballroom, because they were the greatest dancers in the world. And then I closed it in 1966.
You know, Boogaloo was real popular in the 60s. And I have to ask you, being a Latin musician and band leader, why was Boogaloo so rejected by the elder statesmen of the...
Because it was a giant step backwards of where we were going. I mean, completely. It was a disaster harmonically. It was harmony 101, rhythm 101, you know. And the only thing that made it happening was it was sung in English. And the reason that happened is because in 1960, the umbilical cord of information from Cuba ceased. All the bands, the great bands of Cuba, now became persona non grata. And now going into 68, now everything was, now everybody's on their own now. And now it's doing like, I like it like that, and bang, bang, and I never go back to Georgia. And all, Joe Cuba, I love them all, I wish them all the very best. We did one called a.k.a. with Cachao, one of the best, which sung by Che, one of the best, boogaloos that ever called boogaloo ever recorded, and I didn't like it. So somebody, a friend of mine, Benny Monilla, who played with one of the top boogaloo bands, he said, "Could you imagine if Eddie would have liked the boogaloo?" But it was a giant step backward of where we were going, and then it took, and then it never got. Then by that time, 64, they opened a Fania, and by 7, then they came up with the salsa, and then it, with all the arrangers coming out of Puerto Rico, a lot of musicians from Puerto Rico, and they had their run till 1980. Then the Fania just collapsed, and what was happening to Cuba, then they went jazz, into the jazz world. That's when you had Iraquere come out, and everybody who wacaba, they only jazz influence, but that was gone forever,
So basically, would you equate the demise of Boogaloo like the demise of disco? It had its season.
Yeah, it had its 15 minutes of fame and that, and everybody loved it and bad, but so it's all gone. Thank the gods.
2, 3.
the greatest harmonic structure ever, on the planet. Unfortunately, it's not respected the way it should be. The jazz musician has suffered dearly. The pioneers, the young musicians, don't have the opportunity to play and travel the way we should be able to do that, because, again, the upheaval all over the world. I don't want to go, traveling into Europe anywhere, because anything could happen. I have these young players, anything in a bomb in a bus, a bomb in a train, and I got to come back and tell them that their son was killed going on a tour with me. That ain't going to happen. And I got my son with me. And that's why this residency here becomes very important. I stay in New York, where I was born in Manhattan, and I'll be playing for you guys every time you come by to hear us play, all right, different formation. But jazz is the world's most respected musical form ever, and it doesn't get the proper respect in the country that it came out of. That's insane to say here, because what happened here was that the reason that the African captive doesn't comprehend the rhythmical patterns the way they came out of Africa was because when the plantation owners won't allow them to communicate because of fear of communication and revolt. So the only thing they can do was their lament was the blues. Then came the classical blues, and after that, that's the fundamental of jazz. In the Caribbean, it was the drum.
That'll do it again for this very special edition of the Pace Report. I'm Brian Pace, reporting from Sub Rosa here in New York City. I'd like to personally congratulate Mr. Eddie Palmieri for his time. People, please go out and support his weekly residency here at Sub Rosa, as well as buy his brand new CD, Wisdom, which is on the Rope-a-Dope record imprint. For more information, please visit him online at eddiepalmieri.com. I'd like to personally thank the staff and management here at Sub Rosa for their warm hospitality. As always, please visit my website, www.thepacereport.com, for my weekly column, as well as my past segments. Until next time, remember, if it's in the groove, it'll make you move. Till next time, peace.